What do you do when you accidentally forget to take your basal? Uh-oh, big problem. Now, of course, it doesn't apply to pump users, so pump users, hey, keep it down over there. Don't be laughing at us basal bolus types, all right? We got plenty of advantages over you. I've talked about before. But for us basal bolus users, us type 1s who have to inject a long-acting insulin every night or twice a day, sometimes even 3 times depending on insulin. I do twice a day after SIBA, just to give you an example. Once in the morning and once at night. We inject insulin, long-acting insulin, that will act out throughout the day, that will keep our blood sugar normal, whether we're eating or not, right? Every diabetic has to do this. Every type 1 does, at least, who doesn't make their own insulin, doesn't have that honeymoon forever phase like some of us really lucky ones do, and doesn't have a pump, right? But what happens? What do you do when you accidentally forget one of your doses? For example, plenty of times, it's happened more times than I can count, unfortunately. I take my night dose and then I wake up in the morning and oh, my alarm didn't go off when I was supposed to, or I slept through it and I'm running late for work. I get going, I rush out, and then I realize a few hours later, oops, I forgot my basal. What do you do in these kind of situations? What do you do when you forget at night? What do you do when you forget in the morning? What happens? Well, fortunately, with a lot of these very long-acting insulins like Tresiba, for example, or 2J or some others, you might not even notice at first that there's an issue because it's not such a flat profile. It can last such a long time. It sort of overlaps day in and day out that you won't even see a huge rise at first. But you will if you don't take care of it. So you have to take care of it. What do you do in that kind of situation? For example, let me just give an example of what I would do. Let's say I go to bed without thinking about my insulin. I'm sleepy, I'm tired, I crash on the bed and I fall asleep. I wake up as the next morning. Wake up and realize, wait, I forgot my nighttime basal and now my blood sugar's up a little bit. What do I do? Well, first, of course, is you would correct the blood sugar back down. And when you correct that blood sugar, keep in mind the context. You know, I've talked about the context before. Whenever you're doing corrections for your blood sugar, the context right now with your high blood sugar, if it's higher, should be unless you're overdosing basal, is that you didn't take your basal last night, and so now you have less insulin, long-acting insulin in your body, keeping your blood sugar stable, so now it's gone up. And if you take more basal now, it's not going to impact immediately. And if you take your correction now, that rise is still going to be there for a little bit until the new basal comes in. So your correction, first thing first, is you might want to increase it just a smidge, maybe an extra unit or two, depending on how much you need, depending on how much you normally take, what your insulin sensitivity is. Take a little bit more. You might want to take a little bit more for that corrective dose than you normally would without any context, because you know that it's going to keep going up for a little bit, right? So consider that context, first thing. Second thing is, well, what about your basal? How much should I dose? Should I just dose normally? Should I dose double? How should I manage this? Well, first off, don't panic about it. You know, be logical, be reasonable. You're not dead or anything. It's all good. When it comes to at least for when I do my twice a day dose, and I recommend that for most people in most situations because I do feel like even these longer acting insulins like Tresiba to jail don't actually last 24 hours. You're better off having, you know, tinkered it for nighttime and for daytime because the needs differ for nighttime and daytime, and also again it doesn't last that 24 hours really for lower doses like ours, right? So what I would do in this situation, right? Just to cut the chase here, is I would, think about what dose I missed. It would be my nighttime dose. Let's say I just have it 50-50. Let's say I take 8 units a night, 8 units a daytime, something like that, right? I would go, well, I missed 8 units tonight. Should I do double? I don't normally. I normally actually go on the side of caution here because what would happen if you just did double your normal dose is you'd be getting, let's say, 16 units at once instead of 8 units at a time. And so now there's going to be like that moment, maybe a few hours after you take it, where you might crash a little bit because you're getting an excess amount of basal more than you normally would for that time of day. Now, you still need more basal because you didn't take the basal last night. I would instead do a little less than double that amount, or a little less than, adding the two together, right? So for example, if I'm taking, 8 units before, 8 units after, I want to do 16, maybe I'll do 12 or 13 or something like that. And also I'll split up into 2 doses, right? Because typically you don't want to go over 7 units in a dose. That's kind of like the Bernstein rule, right? It's just your body's able to take advantage of it better that way. Maybe I'll make a video going in deep dive about that, but just, take that as it is. Might want to split that into 2 doses, 7 units here, 7 units there, bam, bam, bam. But that's how I typically manage it, because then I avoid having too much basal in my system, even for a short period of time, and having a low. Because you don't want to take too much and go low, right? And that can happen. So just keep that in mind to taking type 1, and also just consider the context. Like, how long have you not gone with your basal? Has it been just a few hours? Has it been, if it's just been a few hours, just take it then. Honestly, probably not a big deal unless it's like not a super long acting one. Has it been just overnight? Again, you might just want to add the two together and decrease it by a few units to make it work. If it's been like a day or more, well, that can be a bit of a bigger issue. You probably have noticed it by now, right? Again, you're going to have to correct more than you normally would. You're going to have to probably keep correcting as your basal starts to go into effect again if it's been like a day or more, right? But certainly it's not something to panic about. It's certainly not something that can't be fixed. It's just one of those little boo-boos that we always experience when managing type 1 diabetes, right? It's always a constant puzzle. We can be imperfect human beings, especially if there's kids and maybe you're trusting the kid to do it and they're not always keeping great track. Things happen. Things happen, right? And you just have to sort of roll up the punches and find solutions like this to make it work. And by the way, finding solutions is a big part of this too. Experiment. Don't make these situations happen. Don't purposefully forget to take your basal. But if you happen to, try a technique like this and see what happens. See if it works out for you. Because I'm giving you my example with like specific numbers, but I'm not saying you should do exactly that. I'm not giving you medical advice here. I'm just trying to give you the fundamentals of a technique to figure out the best way to handle it whenever that situation comes up for you, right? So just keep that in mind. You're taming type 1, and I feel like I didn't really cover going over a day without. Just again, you're going to have to take much more basal, and then you're going to have to just sort of equalize it, right? So let's go back to that example where I forgot that night. I would take a little bit. I would take maybe double, or it would be not double, but slightly less than that, a few units less than double. And then that night, I would just go back to the same routine, right? And that would sort of even it out because you're taking a little bit less. So that way you're not going to be low when you take your basal again at night. And you're taking enough more to get you back over that basal-less gap and keep your blood sugars nice and stable. So those are just some thoughts for you for dealing with the time when you might forget your basal or something else happens like that. You're not having a great day or something. That's all I have for now. And if you want more information on basal testing, on figuring out what basal is best for you, I'll link a video describing a good technique to do that and more information about actually finding what basal works for you. I'll leave it at that. And for now, keep taming your type 1.